Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really big one, a profound concept from the Quran that can be a little tricky. What does it actually mean when we talk about God's anger?
So let's just get right to it. The big question, the one that kind of makes you squirm a little when you read certain verses, does God get angry in the same way you or I do?
To really unpack this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll talk about why this is such an uncomfortable idea. Then, we'll go beyond human emotion. We'll look at what it means to knowingly reject truth, then explore the real consequences, and finally, tie it all together with what it means to live a life of truth.
All right, first up, an uncomfortable idea. Let's really get into why picturing an angry God just doesn't sit right with us.
Think about it. When we talk about anger, what do we mean? For us humans, it's usually a reaction, right? Someone provokes us, and we have this intense, forceful response. It's when we feel like we have to raise our voice, maybe even our hands, to get our way.
And it's not just one thing. Human anger has these stages. It starts with simple disapproval, then that builds into dislike, maybe irritation, and then full-blown anger. And it can even escalate to rage. The source material is very clear. The Quran does not attribute any of these emotional states to God. Okay, so if we're saying it's not that kind of anger, then what in the world is it? Well, that brings us right to our next point. We have to go beyond human emotion and start to understand this word ghadab as moral language, not some kind of feeling.
See, the Arabic word here is ghadab. And when you dig into what that word actually means at its root, it's pointing to something way more profound. It's about an intense displeasure, a kind of moral outrage that happens because someone has deliberately and knowingly violated the truth.
This is so key. Let's really break down the difference here. On one side, you have human anger. It's an emotion, a reaction, it's triggered by provocation, and it often leads to force. But then you look at divine ghadab, and it's described as moral language, a principle, a consequence, and its result isn't force but a withdrawal. Totally different things.
The source gives this fantastic analogy. Think about when we say something like, history will judge them harshly. Does history have feelings? Is it angry? No, of course not. Just like the quote says, this is the moral language we use. It's a way of saying that certain actions have severe, built-in consequences without attaching any emotion to it.
Okay, so this raises a huge question. What actually triggers this divine consequence? What's the specific action? Let's dive into that in our next section, knowingly rejecting truth.
And this is super important to get right. We are not talking about someone who's just confused. We're not talking about someone who's honestly searching for answers or has some intellectual doubts. That is not the trigger.
No, the source lays out this very specific, deliberate path. It goes like this. First, the clear signs arrive. Second, you see them and you know in your heart that they're the truth. And then third, you willfully and consciously deny it. It's not a mistake. It's a choice.
The source points to an example from the Prophet's time in Medina, and the Quran uses this incredibly powerful phrase to describe their level of certainty. They knew him as they knew their own sons. Wow. That just shows this wasn't an error in judgment. It was a denial based on absolute certainty.
So, if it's not some kind of divine temper tantrum, what actually happens? What are the real consequences? Let's look at what this anger truly means in practice.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Ghadab isn't an emotion God feels. It is the natural result, the automatic consequence of the path you choose when you knowingly turn your back on the truth. It's the state you put yourself in.
So what does this withdrawal actually feel like in practice? Well, it's a total shutdown of divine favor. Approval is gone. Guidance and help, they stop. Protection is removed. Even the signs that might have helped you find your way back are taken away. You're left entirely to the path you insisted on choosing.
And it's not just about rejecting a prophet. The source points out other things that lead to the exact same result. Things like breaking a sacred promise or covenant, being willfully disobedient over and over again, or acting arrogant when presented with divine truth.
Okay, this has all been pretty deep, but it brings us to the most important part, a life of truth. What does this all mean for us, right here, right now, in our own lives?
The source warns about this huge mistake that people make. It's this idea of separating truths, thinking you can be dishonest in your business deals or with your family as long as you get the big spiritual stuff right. That's a major error.
And this just lays it all out so clearly. You've got two paths. The path of rejecting truth, which leads to ghadab, that withdrawal of divine favor. But then there's the other path, the opposite path. The one of accepting and living by the truth leads to ridwan, which is approval. It leads to rahmah, or mercy, to the chance for tawbah, repentance, and to a life of submitting to truth.
So, that leaves us with a pretty challenging question to ask ourselves, doesn't it? Looking at our own lives, our work, our families, our private moments, are we living a life of separated truths? It's really a question about integrity and whether we're being consistent in loving and upholding truth in all its forms.